Hi, my name is Nathaniel Ramirez. I'm a film editor and freelance filmmaker based in California. The Motorcycle Archives is a YouTube channel and a podcast where I document the lives of motorcyclists and the people who build them. It's sort of a crossroads between motorcycles and philosophy.
Welcome to the Real Riders Podcast. My name's Simon Josie, and thanks for listening. If this is your first time here, you found a podcast focused on the convergence of motorcycling and filmmaking, just like the tagline says. Not for the first time, I can't remember exactly how I became aware of Nathaniel Ramirez and the Motorcycle Archives, but I have a suspicion our paths crossed somewhere on Instagram, most likely viewing a post by the creator of the podcast This Motorcycle Life, Bruce Philp. Nathaniel and I are both fans of This Motorcycle Life, and after viewing Nathaniel's YouTube channel and then listening to his own podcast, I had a feeling we would have a very This Motorcycle Life-esque conversation when we sat down and recorded the interview for today's episode. In fact, you'll find Nathaniel turn the tables and even asked me some questions, which I have kept in the edit. Forgive me if that appears self-indulgent. It felt like the right thing to do, and hopefully makes me seem less like an AI-generated podcast host. Before we jump to my chat with Nathaniel, I would like to remind you of a few things. Firstly, we are fast approaching Sunday the 19th of May, which is the date for 2024's edition of the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. If you don't know what this is, it's a support ride to raise funds and awareness for men's mental health and prostate cancer research. Get yourself along to www.gentlemansride.com to find out all about it. I'll put the link in the show notes, and you might want to check out some videos of previous year's rides made by Episode 2 guest Matt McFadden of the Classic Rides YouTube channel. Next, don't forget about the Lisbon Motorcycle Film Festival 2024, which is being held on the 10th, 11th and 12th of May. So that's just around the corner. And you might like to check out their website, www.lxmff.com, if you plan to be in the Lisbon area in the middle of May. I'll put the link in the show notes as well. Finally, a reminder about this year's Lightweight Adventure Festival, which I'll be attending as a guest of the Trail and Adventure Motorbike podcast over the 12th, 13th and 14th of July. The site location in the UK's Peak District has now been released and can be found using the What 3 Words code crowd obviously drums. Yes, I'll put that in the show notes too, in case anyone is challenged by my mild Kiwi accent. For tickets, get yourself along to www.lightweightadventurers.co.uk, link in the show notes. I understand the festival organisers are working on the schedule and site layout at the moment. As always, if you have the time and inclination, please consider rating or liking the Real Riders podcast in your favourite podcast app or on YouTube. This will help other listeners find the show. The podcast has accounts on multiple social media channels, but I generally only post to them whenever new episodes of the podcast drop. Please feel free to repost, reskeet, and retweet to help get the word out there about the podcast. A list of the Real Riders socials can be found in the episode's show notes. Okay, righto, let's get to my conversation with Nathaniel. Hey, Nathaniel, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for being part of this episode. How are you today?
I'm doing really great, Simon. Thank you so much for having me.
Look, it's my pleasure. Hey, I know you're based in California. I've heard there's been quite a bit of rain in the state recently. Has that been playing havoc with your own motorcycling?
You know what? People make a big deal out of a lot of things over here, and the rain, I feel like it's been great. I don't think it's been enough for it to really put a damper on things, for me at least.
Right. Yeah, because I'm an old man now, so I'm a real fair weather rider. So if it's raining, I'm not going out. It's got to be sunny. And obviously, I'm in Germany, and we've had a long winter. It's spring now, and things are warming up, and the roads are certainly a lot drier than they were. So let's jump into this. Your YouTube channel and the audio podcast appeared in mid-November last year. And as we record today, viewers can see 4 short documentary films plus the accompanying long-form raw interviews, which serve as the basis for each of the documentary films and the podcast episodes. Perhaps before we talk about the films, it would make sense for us to learn about your origins in filmmaking. As is often the case on this podcast, I don't know anything about you beyond your films and your podcast episodes. So let's find out some more about Nathaniel. I know you grew up in Central California, which is famously one of the centers of US television and filmmaking. Was a career in the film and TV industry always your ambition?
You know what? First of all, thank you for providing such a great introduction. I really appreciate that. And then film, for me, I got introduced in film when I was in high school, actually. And I was very lucky to have a teacher and a good program at my high school that introduced me to the art and the medium of filmmaking. And, back then it was just making videos and stuff, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do for a career. And I really identified with this, being able to express myself. And I was also lucky enough to have a teacher that was able to give me practical advice on where I could take it in the future. So that's just kind of where the idea started. And I moved to LA as soon as I graduated. I went to film school, and the rest was kind of history. I had my own experiences within the industry where I felt that when I was in it, finally, like maybe this wasn't the right decision, but luckily, like, we had this YouTube thing growing and a lot of independent filmmakers being able to make things happen on their own, apart from like the major studios and stuff. And so, yeah, it really gave myself an opportunity to kind of just explore and hone my skills and, do a lot of things. I feel like I'm the type of person I like to do a lot of things, so whether it was editing, pre-production planning, the shoots, or shooting them myself, I was able to do all of it on my own.
And so did you go straight from high school to film school?
Correct. Yeah. I went to Cal State Northridge, and so they were kind of known for their film program. And, being a small town kid over here, I didn't really have a lot of money. And so, going that route as opposed to trying to go into the bigger film schools like USC, some of the more prominent ones, or some of the private schools, it just made sense for me to go to Northridge because of, the value that I was able to get through my education and stuff. But I felt that I was able to get a good, well-rounded education. It wasn't just film, like being able to go through general education and get all that other stuff too.
And how many years was that course? Was it 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, it was a 4-year program. Around the second year, there was an application process to get into the film program. So they only admit like 40 students a year into the program. So you had to answer like a bunch of questions, write an essay, and then also present like a visual story, like almost like a spec story with like pictures. And yeah, it was a good experience.
And you describe yourself as a film editor today. As you went into that program, or even when you were at high school, was the editing the thing that really appealed, or was there another role that you were more interested in?
I think the editing always appealed to me because I felt that that was the last opportunity you had to make an influence on the actual project. And so DPs and directors, they obviously have a huge responsibility to make the project look the way it looks or feel the way it feels. But I feel like ultimately it happens in the editing room. Like that saying like that a movie can be saved in the editing room. And I feel like that's really true. So I wanted to have my hands on it, at the very end. And yeah, that was just kind of the route that I took.
And the training, the course that you did, was it very practical and hands-on, or was it more based in film theory or film criticism?
It was much more film theory and criticism. And I felt like that was very important for like the creative aspect and being able to pull from all these things like now. But in the moment, you want to be hands on and stuff. And there wasn't. I feel like that's the issue with a lot of film schools, is that you're kind of starting from like ground zero and you don't really know anything. Whereas like I felt like I had a little bit of experience in high school, so I was ready to hit the ground running, when I got into the program. But yeah, that was just the way it was, and I learned a lot more and I honed a lot of my skills outside of college in order to just provide for myself. So I would freelance. I was freelance editing throughout college, basically.
And what kind of jobs are available as a freelancer for someone who is studying? Like, what kind of work what kind of projects were you typically working on?
It was a lot of small stuff, like social media was like getting really big. So like a lot of social media videos or, a lot of wedding videos. I think a lot of people get their start doing small stuff like that. Yeah, that was basically it. And then just videos for friends around campus. I worked on campus for a while in like the student marketing department, and I would do videos for the school. So honestly, anything I could get my hands on, I was doing it because it was paying.
Sure. Yeah, I can I can understand that, having been a student many years ago. Um, Something that you kind of touched on, and I'm really interested in, is how do you see the role of the editor in that creative process? So maybe you can share with us what your experience has been, because to me, it's really interesting to know to what extent you have an input into the creative process. Are you just, for example, following someone else's edit decisions, or are you actually really having a very direct impact on the pacing and the storytelling of the final, film or video?
I think I've experienced both a lot. And part of the reason why I decided to start the motorcycle archives is because, I felt like that it was my obligation just to be the one that was making the decisions myself. Before I started this thing, I was working for an agency and we were traveling the country filming kind of like motorcycle style content. And I had to like work with producers and stuff, and they had the final decision on how the project went, even though I believe that I was the expert in this specific field. Like that was my job title. And so through that, like I just realized that like it's not going to really happen. Like I'm gonna have to do this myself, and so that's why I started the motorcycle archives, to have that control and to be able to express myself creatively. Because I feel like a lot of the times you're kind of doing stuff for other brands, if it's for work or you know, it doesn't really get across the way you filmed it. Perhaps like you lose a little bit of that humanity to like sell like a product or something. And I feel like that the internet and the world kind of needs that humanity.
Mm, mm. When you're in the editing suite or working on a project, just in general, with whom do you have a critical relationship? Is it the writer? Is it the director? Is it the producer? What's been your experience?
So my experience, it's been like producers mainly. I've worked on a lot of projects where there's not really a director. Like in the agency, for example, our director was overshadowed by the producer. So, a lot of those decisions kind of get axed and in the name of like the producer that is following directions from the brand itself. So I think it's kind of unfortunate, like that it works that way in sometimes because we spend so much time like learning these skills, learning the art of this, and I feel like we should be valued with that same, because we're all experts in this.
I mean, historically, that's been one of the distinctions between film and television, hasn't it? The prominence of the producer in artistic decisions. That seems to be more the case with television as opposed to film. With film, we we usually see the director's name last or first rather than the producer's, don't we, when it comes to rolling the credits?
That's correct. Yeah. And, I haven't worked on a lot of narrative projects aside from like the projects in school or a lot of it's, commercial stuff for agencies or social media stuff. So that kind of mimics like film, like, you're telling a story about somebody, but it's for this brand. And so that you have to like kind of tailor it to that brand rather than allowing that person just to be their true self.
Mm,
That's the stuff that I like though. I like the people. It's my favorite part.
right. Through your experience post college and high school, as well as when you were studying, did you form any opinion about whether a film video production is the result of a collective of people working together, or really the individual creative vision of someone. What's, it's this whole auteur theory versus the collective working on, do you have an opinion on that theory, basically?
I guess I would say that like it's both, and it depends on the production, depends on the director. Like I just saw Dune recently. I don't know if you've had a chance to see Dune Part 2.
I haven't seen the second part yet.
When I watched that movie, I just think that, Denis has a very clear idea of what he wants. Like every single frame is calculated, and he has everybody on that crew that are experts in their own field, whether it's costume, whether it's lighting, whether it's sound design, that he's managed to get all on the same page with him. And I think that's amazing. Like it's the fact that those movies still get made in a world of Marvel movies, and some people probably won't like that, but it's crazy because I feel like, yeah, like on the other side, the Marvel movies are that kind of like everybody's not collectively getting together to make something that, I don't know. I guess that depends on which Marvel movie, but I think that's what I would say on that, if that makes sense.
I think it totally does. I mean, particularly when as you talked earlier about the a lot of the work that you've done and the producer basically calling all the shots, and it also been a small crew. I mean, in a small crew, you do everything yourself, so you've got complete control over what you're doing. But yeah, I've always been a little bit fascinated by the discussion around auteur theory, because I tend to think that there's a lot of people who are pulling in a certain direction to make a big production, and I personally don't think you can credit the final resulting film to just one particular individual. I mean, there've been some marvelous directors who've been given terrible scripts and the films have been terrible. I don't think you can fix bad writing with good direction, and the other way probably as well, which is if you've got great writing and poor direction, then I think you can have a disaster as well. One thing also that I find personally a little bit interesting is that you often hear actors speak about films that they've been on, and they say, "Oh, it was a great script, but we've got no idea whether it's going to be popular. We've got no idea whether it's going to be a critical success." And I always find that kind of fascinating because, hey, you were on the set, you had the script in front of you. You must have had a feeling that this was going to click or not, and yet they sort of express, "Well, we've got no idea until it comes out." I mean, have you heard people talk like that way as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel with the YouTube thing. I don't know if I'm going to get any views on this or not. But no, definitely. I think there's something to that. And I would also agree with you and also disagree with you because, for the same reason I said earlier, like it's a medium that very collaborative and everybody on set has a strong like influence. Like if you said, if the script is bad, then the movie's probably going to be bad. If the editing's bad, the movie is going to feel weird when you watch it, even if the director was great. But at the same time, it takes like that director sometimes to rally everybody together and like bring in all the right people that can get on the same page with him or her. And I feel like that's like the other side of that. So I feel like kind of both are true in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Perhaps that's why people maybe argue about auteur theory, because you probably can, it's sort of, you can understand that aspects of it are both true and false, sort of, yeah.
Right. And like, Orson Welles couldn't have made those movies all by himself,
Yeah.
He needs people with him.
Yeah. So Nathaniel, the Motorcycle Archives, where did that idea come from?
Well, it kind of goes back to the conversation we had earlier about the agency that I was working at. And, you have producers in there kind of influencing this project that you're working on. Well, we were in Tennessee and we were filming this motorcycle builder, Mike Harris, is called 40 Cal Customs, based out of Knoxville, Tennessee. And we had such amazing footage and he was just an amazing person. And I just felt so excited because I love motorcycles and I wasn't really there for motorcycles, but we were there to film this project for this brand. And so I was just excited to be there with bikes, And a couple months later, as we're editing the project, it just so many amazing parts of his story just gets taken away. And I just felt so sad because I was like, this guy is so cool. Like, why wouldn't you want to share this story with people? And it just made me think like, well, shoot, I'm doing this work for this company anyways, like basically all the work. Why don't I just do this myself? And so that's kind of how the Motorcycle Archive started. I kind of just started producing these projects on my own and with the intention of just really just sharing stories about people because I feel like that wasn't really the emphasis of what the motorcycle community is focusing on at the moment. And I felt like I could add like my own twist to it being a filmmaker. And so that's kind of how the whole thing started. And yeah, here we are. I'm excited to do more and more, meet more people.
And the form of, I mean, if I look at those 4 documentaries that you've published to date on the YouTube channel, they follow a sort of a similar form and style. They're all, I think, under 10 minutes. Was that your initial concept for the documentaries, and is that the form, the style that you plan to continue with?
Yeah, well, to be truthful, I wasn't really 100% sure on how they were going to end up after I filmed it. And that first episode was sort of like me, like in real time, kind of figuring out what the style of voice was going to be for the project. And a lot of it kind of carries through the actual guest and their story, and they're kind of narrating the story for us, like walking us through their journey. And so I guess my style, I just wanted to be true to the people that are on the show. And I wanted to make it feel like you're there with us experiencing this little moment. So just like true documentary, essentially. And I plan to do that moving forward, along with other stuff too. There's some things that I want to do about the community that don't center around like people specifically, and that are just sort of like maybe short films about the history of motorcycles or a certain topic. So this is sort of just like the beginning stages for that.
To what extent had you planned the structure of the interviews before you had them, or were you very sort of open about, let's just go talk to this builder and let's see where it goes?
I do my research on each person that I have on the show, just whether through conversation or through stuff they have online. Like if they have some kind of following, I get to understand kind of what the bikes that they're building are, and what their kind of their philosophy on this stuff is too. And sometimes that's discovered through the conversation, but I like to keep it kind of free flowing, like we're just having a conversation for like an hour and a half, and let the conversation kind of go where it goes to make it feel as raw and real as possible. And through that, I feel like things that are brought up are super natural, and I think it comes through really well on film. So there's not a whole lot of planning in terms of like the structure beforehand, but being an editor for so long, I think that helps me kind of like, cut everything together.
Yeah, because you've released the raw interviews as well, both as an audio podcast and also on the YouTube channel. And that first one with Peter is really interesting because there's some real drama in that, and you actually really cut things a lot in terms of the sequencing. So if you listen to the linear sequence, which is the raw interview, it goes along in a certain sequence, and you've really jumbled that sequence up quite a bit in the documentary, and it really builds the story. Is that the kind of thing that is quite difficult to actually do?
That first one was especially difficult. I had a hard time figuring out what was going to stay in the video. Originally, the video was like 10 minutes. And that, you cut down like 50 minutes from the video. It's like, that's a lot, But yeah, at the same time, I'm kind of wrestling with this idea of like, I'm producing for the internet too. So the audience is going to be different than somebody that's going to go watch it, like, I don't know, on TV or something. So, there's things that I have to take out, to, like, kill your darlings, as they say, So there's that I'm kind of wrestling with. And then, secondly too, yeah, like to be able to make it engaging throughout, you have to kind of edit it non-linearly, kind of like you're referring to. Things have to be in different orders to kind of build like either suspense or whatever it is, and be engaging. So yeah, that was definitely part of it as well.
Did you feel after that first one? I mean, I'm assuming you filmed, edited, produced and published that one first before you did the others. Is that
Hmm.
how you've done things? Yeah.
That's how I did that first one, and then I kind of got some momentum, and I filmed like four back to back. I'm editing one right now, and so all those other ones I was like editing all at the same time, essentially.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah. So my goal for this year was to do like once a month, but I kind of went hard on the first few in the beginning. But
Yeah, well, once a month sounds pretty challenging because I know
Mhm.
for this little project, and I don't have any video component at all. I'm spending a lot of time on YouTube watching people's videos to try and get a sense of who they are and what they do and why they do it. So yeah, good luck with that once a month. But yeah,
Yeah, no, it's tough. It's super tough.
yeah. But yeah, the Peterbilt episode is yeah, it really sets such a high bar, I think, for the rest of them. But one of the other things that I really like about them is the way, particularly the last one, the guy, I can't remember his name, sorry, the guy up in San Francisco. I love the way you incorporated a lot of the footage, obviously, that he had taken, particularly like riding through the rain and you know, why am I doing this? This is crazy. So it's
Yeah.
have your interview guests been willing to share material for you to incorporate?
Oh yeah, I mean everybody that I've had on so far has been so amazing. I've been super lucky to meet such amazing people, and Yama in particular too in San Francisco, he just radiated so much like positivity, and so I was hoping to like kind of capture a little bit of that on film, and share it with everybody. But um, yeah, everybody's is really awesome when it comes to that, and I think also they're they want to share their stories as well. It seems like Yama, he has his own channel too, and he does like a lot of long form kind of videos or just like sharing like updates of what's going on in the shop and stuff. And so to be featured in a different way, I think
Mm,
is really cool for this community.
mm, mm. And how big is the community? Because like I've got this question I want to ask is like, are you going to run out of potential subjects, or is it just does it seem endless at the moment?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of prominent people in the community that like has a name for themselves and are doing stuff. So there's a lot of options and all over the country, all over the world, really too. Like I was thinking, like, man, I want to go to Japan and do this and film a story about somebody in the future. That's what I have in mind. So there's definitely not a short of people. And then there's also people that are just kind of not on the internet that you don't know about that are have such amazing stories. Like my third episode was with Robert Martinez, and he's just like a guy that works in a normal job in LA area, and he's just restoring his dad's bike who passed away recently, and it's just a beautiful story. So there's a lot of amazing people out there that there's definitely not a shortage.
And when you refer to the community, it's sort of the handcrafted, the people working with the hands that I think you're referring to, restoring and doing a lot of, we would say spannering, but you would say wrenching, I guess, of on bikes and typically older bikes because they make it a lot easier to work on, right? I mean, am I right
Correct.
in characterizing the community that you talk about in that way?
Yeah, no, definitely. These are definitely people that are the type of people that want to do it themselves. And similar to the way like we want control over our filmmaking, they want the same over their machines. And I think it's a beautiful art, and it's fragile because I feel like it's something that's dying because it's being replaced with technology with these things that we can't really, you have to have like a much deeper, like, specific understanding of how this machine functions or this computer works than like, a carburetor, for example. But it's a beautiful thing.
I want to try a question, but it could crash and burn, which is a question that's sort of prompted by a guy that I knew when I was pretty young. He was at school when I was at school, and he once had a rant we were at a party, and he was ranting about computers and how computers were killing us, and that, you shouldn't be allowed to paint a picture on a computer. You should, if you want to paint a picture, you should do it with your hand on an easel and stuff like that. And I felt he was wrong at the time because I thought it was too simplistic an argument because if my form of expression is the written word, I'd much rather work with a word processor rather than a typewriter because of your ability to easily edit things, move things around, things that you can't do with an old analog typewriter. And so I thought he was wrong with his argument. However, having said that, one of the things that I do recognize is there's something amazing about working with your hands and crafting or just creating with your hands, the physical experience of creation with your hands. And it can be all sorts of things, actually. And I think working with things like motorcycles, I think falls into, can fall under that sort of umbrella. But then I'm thinking what you do, what we're doing now, where we are relying so heavily on these tools to create films, to create podcasts. We could not have done this 40 years ago so easily in our bedrooms, in our basements. I feel that these electronic tools have, it may be a little bit pretentious to say, but I feel it's really democratized certain creative endeavors. You can make an album in your bedroom. You can create a video channel on YouTube in your bedroom. We could not have done that 40 years ago. Is that something that you've thought about? I mean, you work effectively in the digital sphere, but you've obviously got a real passion and interest for people who are working with their hands. Is that something that you've thought about?
100%. That's something I think about that often and I think I agree with you 100% because like I said, like you said, like I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't for these technologies, if it wasn't for these computers. I grew up in the 90s, so like it's always been kind of a part of me. But like with that, like I also think we shouldn't take what we've had for granted. Like the experience is something that's lacking from like a lot of these technologies, which is something that I feel like I'm trying to highlight through the YouTube is like, new bikes are really awesome and everything, but like what Yama said in my last video, like it's about the gas stops every 50 miles where you're just hanging out with your friends trying to cool down, and if you're on something that's just going to be perfect all the time, you're never going to have that struggle or that feeling of being uncomfortable. And I feel like that's something that's like natural for us as humans, and like one's not better than the other, and I feel like we have to respect both. Both the technology and the stuff that's I guess you could say more primitive, but I feel like it's not really. It just kind of connects you more to this slower lifestyle, which I think is, at least I try to live my life a little bit in that way. But I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's something that we could all kind of think about.
Yeah. Speaking of slower pace, longer things, do you have any ambition to expand what you're doing with the channel into longer form documentaries? And if you do, what would that mean in terms of your approach? I mean, I'm just guessing at a very superficial level, everything slows down. You slow down the pacing of your editing. You immediately are thinking about a different type of audience, maybe a theatre-based audience who are going there fully. They've given up a couple of hours to watch an engaging story. Have you thought about doing something a little bit longer form?
It's funny that you mentioned that because I haven't thought about that a ton, but kind of recently I was just kind of like thinking of ideas, and I remember there's this film festival. I can't remember where it is, but it's a film festival specifically about motorcycle filmmakers. And I was like, man, that sounds really cool. Like, well, I was just trying to imagine like if I had one of my pieces like on there, and like what that experience would be like, and what would it would be like to connect with, other people that are doing like similar things. I kind of thought of it before. I just haven't really made any like motion to pursue it yet, but I would say, yeah, it's at the back of my head. I think that's really cool. And that's kind of like what inspired me to do this thing, like to get into film to begin with, is the movies, like the longer format stories. So maybe one day.
Yeah, well, there's the Toronto-based the Motorcycle Film Festival, which
Mm-hmm.
has been running, oh God, I'm going to get in trouble for not remembering, but for a few years now. And the next edition will be in September this year. And I'm actually planning to go. I just need to pull my finger out and buy a ticket to Toronto. But I've been in touch actually with the festival director there, who's actually been on. He was a guest at least once on this Motorcycle Life podcast, which you and I were talking about before we started recording. So I heartily encourage you to go back through the old episodes of this Motorcycle Life and look for the discussion with Caius there, because you'll learn a lot about the festival.
That I think that's where I initially heard of it, and I just somewhere it got packed in my brain.
Yeah, and there's also a Lisbon Motorcycle Film Festival, and I thought about going to it, but I've decided against it. But I may consider. I mean, it's obviously a bit closer to where I am here in Germany, but I'm considering maybe in the future going to that one.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a famous UK motorcyclist, Austin Vince, who was running a film festival in the UK, but he stopped running that. So yeah, I know that you can actually stream. You can stream the content from the TMFF, the Motorcycle Film Festival, online. Some of it's free, some of it you have to pay a bit of a fee for. But yeah, get along to the website and have a look what's there.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds cool.
I'm particularly interested in the longer form stuff. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube, but I'm a bit old school, and I like old form documentaries. The ones that take 90 minutes or more. That's very appealing to me. Yeah. I'm going to get into all sorts of trouble with my listenership if I don't ask you about your motorcycling origins. So, Nathaniel.
Oh yeah.
Look, I'm old enough that there's this popular idea which circulates amongst those of us who grew up outside the United States, but who were heavily exposed to American culture or American pop culture, that every kid who grew up in California had access to a motorbike. So I'm sure that's nonsense, but can you just tell me, is it true or is it complete nonsense?
Well, I mean, it wasn't true from my experience, really. I got lucky because my grandpa got a motorcycle when he was like 85 years old, which is much later in life.
Wow!
So that was my first memory as a child, like a 10-year-old, seeing a motorcycle and then getting on the back of my uncle and stuff. And then it wasn't until like I was in high school where my sister got a motorcycle. She was a little older than me, and so she kind of paved the way in my family. So whenever she came back to visit, boom, I'd hop on her bike and I'd take it for a ride and stuff. And so that's kind of where I got caught with like the love of like bikes and like just always wanting to ride. And then it kind of just graduated to when I was able to get my first bike. That was what I spent my money on, my little piece of crap Honda that was $500, or it's like $200 actually. And it didn't run. I take it home. I take the carburetor apart. I clean it all out. Boom, I get it running. Then I take it down the road, and then I'm like, what the heck? Like I had to like turn the handlebar at like a 30-degree angle for it to go straight. I'm like, this is not right. I take it home again, take the tank off, and the frame is just completely bent. I'm just like, well, there it is. It's $200 bike. Like, what do you expect? And then, man, ended up getting rid of that one, and slowly got a little bit better bike, a little bit less of a piece of crap. But yeah, that was sort of like my origin story.
Okay, so that's the origin, and have you continuously had had a bike or bikes?
From the moment that I bought my first bike, I've always had a bike. Throughout college, I wanted a bike. I just didn't have the money to pay for it, and I was kind of focused on like getting that stuff done. But as soon as I graduated and I got my first job out of school, yeah, I bought that little piece of crap Honda, and I shouldn't say that. It was a cool bike, but yeah, and then it was just kind of ever since then, I've always had a bike, and I don't think I'll ever go without one.
What have you got? What are you riding these days?
So right now I have two Harleys. One of them's a 2020 Sportster, and then I have a 1982 Ironhead Sportster. And I kind of got, the Harley bug, that, I went from Honda and then to Yamaha. I love Yamahas, by the way. I had a lot of dual sport bikes, and that's kind of like where I want to go back. I was thinking about selling one of the bikes and getting like a dual sport and doing some off-road riding and stuff. I have some cousins in Idaho, um, and stuff. So yeah, right now I have those two Sportsters and I love them. They've been great. People talk bad about the Ironhead a lot, but I've had really good experience with it. Just aside from the general maintenance and stuff, and little generator issues here and there, but it's been pretty good to me.
And if you were to describe yourself, what type of motorcyclist are you? I mean, are you someone who rides every day, like commutes to work? Are you someone who, like me, keeps it in the garage and waits for a fine day and takes it out on Sunday afternoon, keeps it nice and clean and tidy? Are you someone who likes, the idea of a long distance ride? Is that really appealing?
I guess I'm the type of rider that likes to adventure and go into like connect with nature. That's like my main objective whenever I'm doing it. So I'm in Central California, kind of close to the foothills of this sequoias. And so if I could get off on either a weekday or weekend to go out there and just kind of sit by the river and just relax, or like go on a hike, like that's like my ideal kind of situation. But I do have plans to do some longer trips. This year I want to do a trip out to Idaho, actually, from California to Idaho, to visit my family. Because those long rides, there's something about those long rides that is especially special. Like,
Yeah, and does that tie into your interest in motorcycling philosophy? Because I was talking, my last episode, I was talking to a guy called Tom Gould, and I was asking him about, when he's riding, does he listen to something? And he and his girlfriend are riding from the UK down to South Africa at the moment, and they have intercoms and they talk to each other. And he says that's really useful on some of the really boring rides. And I was saying, well, actually, I'm really old school, and I actually don't want anything to distract me. And I kind of like well, of course, it's not silence, but I like being with my own thoughts when I'm riding. Where are you at with that?
I'm glad you brought this up, actually. And I think this ties into the conversation that we were having earlier with like technology versus like, more analog stuff and working on with your hands and stuff. I agree. I don't like having the headphones, like the communications. I feel like it interferes with the experience. And I've ridden with people that are like, man, you got to get that, the Cardo, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But like, I don't want to feel like I'm trying to unplug whenever I get on my bike. I don't want to plug in more. And so, yeah, I agree with you. In my experience, I like being with my thoughts as well. And I think I get a lot of like really good thinking when I'm riding motorcycles, either with people or just when you're on your own and you're just going down the highway for, God knows how long. And you're forced to confront things. A lot of people have kind of like talked about it as being like a meditation. And I mean, there's truth to that. It is. Now, how many opportunities do you have in your life, especially with phones, computers, all this stuff, to really sit and not be distracted by anything, you know? So I think it's a beautiful thing. I don't think I'll ever, aside from like sometimes I'll have like AirPods in and I'll listen to music, or if I need directions, you know, but that's about it.
Mm, yeah. I guess it sort of implied that I tend to ride without anyone else as well. Years ago,
Uh,
I did ride with one or two close friends, and I'm not opposed to riding with people, but this is something that I've said before, which is that I've done a lot of scuba diving, and as time went on, I realized I really only wanted to scuba dive with people who I wanted to scuba dive with. In other words, I don't want to really scuba dive now with a lot of random strangers, because I suspect that there are certain parallels to your attitude and approach to scuba diving and your attitude and approach to riding a motorcycle. And I think you've got to find your crowd and be really comfortable. And most of the time these days, I probably prefer to ride by myself. of course, I would never scuba dive by myself. That's sort of a big no-no in scuba diving. But there's like, luckily my youngest son scuba dives, and yeah, I enjoy going with him. But it's I feel it's a very similar thing. When you're diving, you can't talk obviously underwater, and when you're riding a motorcycle, if you don't have an intercom, you can't talk. But you sort of have to trust the person that you're riding with or the person that you're diving with. Sort of, there's a very high level of trust that's required, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too, because there's definitely parallels in a lot of different things. Like I like to compare these long motorcycle trips to like my experience backpacking. Is like you're kind of just one with like the world and experiencing it, and you can't go back home. You can't like, all right, I'm gonna go in the car and get all warm and cozy, you know. It's not really like that. And I think that's like like a really attractive part of it. I've never been scuba diving before. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm living
Yeah.
I'm living a long way from the sea at the moment, which, I come from New Zealand originally, and to live so far away from the sea is very odd. But
Yeah.
I've lived in a few places where we were able to really exploit the lovely diving conditions. So I feel very lucky. Which sort of brings me to the question, which is, have you, beyond California or other parts of the States, have you ridden a motorcycle elsewhere in the world?
Yeah. Only in one other place. I was lucky enough to go to. I went to Italy last year, and I was lucky enough to ride in like near the Alps in Lake Como.
Yeah.
So I was going all through with me and my sister actually, which kind of goes back to like she got me into riding. So shout out to Jacqueline. Um, but anyways, I was on a Moto Guzzi V100, and she was on an Aprilia. It was like an adventure bike. I'm not really like an adventure tourer kind of bike.
Yep.
Can't remember the model. I think of the Touareg maybe. It was a great bike. I was sad. I was sad because my bike was super heavy and big and all this stuff, and we're going through these tiny little roads, windy roads in the mountains, and it was kind of scary, but it was beautiful, man.
And how long was that trip? Like, how many, was it multi-day that or was it just, how many days were you out there cycling?
The motorcycle itself was only a day.
Okay.
We were there with our whole family, so we were kind of and that was just the little thing that we get to sneak into our trip, aside from all the other stuff. But it was awesome.
And I assume it was like summertime or good weather.
Yeah. The weather was perfect. Like we like lucked out. But yeah, I mean, I would love to go riding in more countries and stuff. Like you mentioned, you're from New Zealand. Like that would be so cool. I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, so from what I understand, they filmed a lot of stuff over there.
Yeah, well, I've only actually ridden a motorcycle in the North Island, but I've done a lot of cycling on the South Island, and yeah, a lot of people say, "Oh, don't bother with the North Island," but the great thing about New Zealand is you have a tremendous diversity of geography in a relatively small package. Volcanoes, amazing mountains, gorgeous beaches, which most people don't think of New Zealand, but there's some really, really gorgeous beaches up, well, in the South Island, but also in the North Island. So yeah, there's tremendous diversity. It's really good for cycling, at least the distances are really good for cycling. But I see a lot of people now are really enjoying motorcycling. One of my earlier guests, Runa, she's just got back a few weeks ago from basically a month in motorcycling around New Zealand, and she spent a lot of time in the South Island. She's been posting to Instagram. The YouTube videos haven't started to publish yet, so looking forward to seeing those.
Cool.
Yeah.
Whereabouts are you from in New Zealand?
I'm from the far north, so
Okay.
yeah, so north of Auckland, the very far north. It's sort of subtropical, gorgeous beaches, lovely water, a lot of water-based activities. People fish, boat, ski, a lot of sailing when I was growing up. So I feel, quite lucky.
Well, that's cool. I would love to go there one day. That's awesome. What brought you to? You said you're in Germany now. What brought you to Germany?
Well, it's actually my wife's job that's brought us to Germany. We've lived for many, like more than 20 years in Asia and in places, China, Taiwan, Philippines, Singapore.
Wow.
And that was my job that sort of took us to all those different countries. And then she got an opportunity to come to Germany. And so it was time for me to follow her here. And I can tell you the motorcycling here is much better than in Singapore.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you guys got a bunch of nice roads over there. What's in the garage for you right now?
I have an old man motorcycle, which is there was one bloody podcast referred to the people who ride it as the cigars and dressing gown set because it's so comfortable. So I have a BMW R1250 RT, which I like to tell my wife is BMW's smallest touring motorcycle. So, but it's still
Yeah.
it's still an enormous bike. And initially, I thought, oh, you sort of ride around on the expressway here, the autobahn, many of which are unrestricted in terms of the speed. But as I became more confident, quickly I realized that actually it's so boring driving on the autobahn. And now I love going into, because where we are in the far west corner of Germany, if I wanted to, I can swing up to the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, all within one day. You can do a big loop. And okay, I have to be careful who I offend here. I've already probably offended all of Sweden for their flat, boring country. But, the Netherlands, okay, lots of nice flowers and windmills. But from a motorcycling point of view, it's not that exciting. And likewise, sort of northern Belgium. But if you go into southern Belgium, it's gorgeous. And then Luxembourg, it's also really beautiful. I mean, the roads in Luxembourg are just so well maintained. And then you come into Germany and France as well. It's really, I feel very lucky here. And this is just in my backyard. I mean, I can go from where I am in Bonn, I can go either east into the mountains or west into the mountains or south into the mountains, basically, or the big hills.
That's amazing.
Yeah. If I want to go to more spectacular, like to the Alps, that's a little bit further away, and that will happen. But just for day rides out from where I live, I feel very, very privileged. It's gorgeous. Yeah,
Definitely. That's awesome. I would love to make it out there one day. Is there a lot of English speakers over there where you kind of interact, or do you speak German while you're out?
I mean, yeah, there are occasionally people will come up to me and they'll see that I've got German plates and they'll start speaking German, and they'll soon work out that my German's pretty rudimentary at the moment still. And I mean, there are a lot of Germans who don't speak English, but there are quite a few Germans who do speak English. And so, we'll have a talk about, oh, how heavy is your bike? And, why'd you buy that bike? And all sorts of stuff like that. But you often see, because the Netherlands is so flat, a lot of people come down from the Netherlands, and from Belgium and ride in places like Luxembourg or the Western Hills on the border with Germany. So you often see lots of Dutch riders as well. On a sunny weekend, there's just hundreds of bikers out. It's much more an activity, a pastime, rather than a means of commuting, I would say, in this part of the world, which is, of course, completely different to my experience of living in Asia, where a motorcycle is just seen as a cheap means of getting around. Yeah.
True.
Nathaniel, from what I've seen, the YouTube channel has been, in its short history, it's been quite successful. It started, like I said at the top, just in the middle of November last year. Since then, you've grown to more than 10,000 subscribers, and you've had some pretty impressive viewing figures on a number of the videos. What do you attribute the channel's success to?
The algorithm, the computer. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I was actually going to ask you. I was going to tease you. I was going to say, hey, are you just really good at working the algorithm, because it's quite impressive.
I think what it is mainly. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's a mixture of the algorithm for sure. I think that definitely helped me. I don't really understand how it works, and from what I understand, they're constantly tweaking things and changing. But one thing that I can say is I feel like the humanity that I'm bringing to this community and these videos is something that doesn't really exist outside of it. And I think that there's there's definitely like an audience out there that is wanting to, or feel they resonate with that. So I think I kind of struck a chord there. And then also, the YouTube robots are kind of helping me out a little bit too. But I've noticed that, the videos that I put in afterwards, each episode that I put after the first one is getting a little bit less views. So, I think there's something, maybe there's like some viral thing that happened with that first one that I can't really explain, but yeah, it's weird. I don't understand how the internet works like that, but I'm trying to understand.
I've seen that with other channels as well, and I've noticed it, and I've also got questions in my mind, and I don't have the answers. I don't know why that's happening. Do you feel any pressure to keep producing the same type of film, the same type of documentary, based on the feedback that you're getting?
I don't feel pressure to, but it's something I definitely want to. But I don't feel the pressure to do that. Honestly, like after that first video blew up, I was kind of tripping out because, like I've never been on that side of like something of like that much exposure or anything, and I was just kind of amazed at how positive everybody's comments were and stuff. So I try to like kind of peek in there and like write certain people like as much as I can and appreciate them. But at the same time, like I'm also not really like trying to let that influence me so much right now. But maybe in the future, I think I'll probably start to like, yeah, like if they have suggestions of things like, oh, like we'd love to see this thing. Like somebody in the comments said something about they want to see like a video about like what their first bike should be. And I was like, shoot, like I'm not qualified to like answer that question for you, but maybe I can make a story or a video about like how that is basically up to you, and like what your lifestyle is, and that there's no wrong bike to be your first bike. I haven't really figured that out yet. So I think maybe in the future, like it'll influence what videos that I make, but I don't feel pressured at all.
Just looking to wrap up with a few final thoughts. As a filmmaker yourself, who have you taken inspiration from, and who do you feel has influenced you, and who would you encourage others to watch?
Ooh, like other independent filmmakers or just anything in general?
I want it to be fairly open-ended as a question, because
Yeah.
I don't want you to think, oh, well, there's this motorcycle, documentary maker or this YouTube
Right.
channel, because I don't want you to limit your answer to that. I want you to say, well, when I was growing up, this is what really got me excited, or, nowadays, hey, this is what I'm aiming for. Hey, maybe everyone else should have a look at this person because what they're producing is amazing, or I mean, like my last guest, Tom, he said, oh yeah, I actually don't really watch too many motorcycle YouTube channels, even though I run one. And I thought that was lovely, because he then talked about some other people, particularly their story crafting, which was very important, which is something that I'm very interested in, because I think there's a lot of uninspiring motorcycle filmmaking on YouTube, and that's why I'm more interested in the storytelling. So yeah, it's really who gets you excited, or currently or in the past.
Yeah. So for this motorcycle thing specifically, I want to say that Todd Bluebaugh on YouTube, that's his name on YouTube. He also has a podcast called the Blue Toddcast, and he specifically creates films about like the chopper scene in motorcycles, and the format that he does his videos is just, or I mean, they're films really, and they capture a lot of that like in the moment human aspect. And so he was like a huge inspiration for me starting this thing. I think he's an amazing filmmaker. And then also say that just generally, like anything that like I consume, like I wouldn't even say like a specific filmmaker. I feel like I'm inspired by so many different things, just life experiences. And I feel like that we should always kind of be like open to learning new things, and allow those things to be expressed through our art, which is like this filmmaking thing. And I just want to continue to do that.
And finally, the last question I usually ask my guests is, does filmmaking enhance or diminish the pleasure of a motorcycle ride? But today I'm going to modify that a little bit and ask, does all this thinking and talking about motorcycles, which you clearly do, does that enhance or diminish the pure pleasure of a motorcycle ride for you?
I don't think so. I like to separate certain things. Like when I think about like filming, sometimes I'm like, oh man, it'd be cool to film this like for the YouTube. Like I could probably get some views or something. But sometimes I'm like, I just want to shut that part off and I just want to enjoy it, And so yeah. There's like a balance. I feel like you have to strike, or at least I do. And it's hard sometimes, but I just love it.
Hey, Nathaniel, thanks so much for being my guest today. Other than your YouTube channel and the podcast, is there anywhere else people can find you online?
Yeah. If you go on Instagram and you type in @MotoArchives, that's a place where you could kind of directly message me. I created some t-shirts, which you can't see because the cameras aren't rolling. But if you're interested in supporting me directly on these videos, send me a message on there or send me an email at Nathaniel@motorarchives.com, and let me know if you'd like to order a t-shirt.
Once again, thanks very much, Nathaniel, and best of luck with the channel.
Thanks, Simon. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for reaching out.